Welcome into another episode of Don't Call This a Podcast. I am your host, Ryan McLaughlin, and back with me once again, it's Ms. D.
Hello, I'm finally back. I missed you guys. Hi.
We missed you too. You and Courtney have left me out hanging the last few weeks. I'm
Oh,
not
please
not
stop.
very happy
Let's
about that.
okay. Go ahead. You are Ryan.
Huh?
You are Ryan. Don't
Okay.
try to make it like we just left you to the dust. You had interviews. You did a great job. You didn't need us for them, so
You could have
I'm
interviewed
back.
with me. Anyway, all right, whatever. So what we've been doing, if you all haven't really tuned into this season, we have kind of shifted gears and more so had a focus, an interview style focus with a few creative types as well as just people doing unique things in their community. So we've had Dr. Ryan Spivey, who is a pharmacist who graduated from Sanford's McWhorter School of Pharmacy. She talked to us about, the importance of representation in the field and trying to grow the amount of young women in the field as well as young Black people in the field. We also talked to Pasaka Simone, who recently released a book detailing the grieving process that her and her friend went through as she lost her mother and her friend lost her daughter, and how they were able to come together and kind of work through those grievances. And we also have interviewed Charles McDonald. So today, this one is very near and dear to me. It's very special to me because it's somebody very close to me. Desa Larkin-Boutte has been working in the entertainment field for the last, how long now, Dessa?
9 years. 9 years.
9 years. So wow, has it been 9 years already?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So she has been working in the entertainment industry for the last 9 years. She has taken on projects big and small, and she is somebody that, as I said, is near and dear to my heart. This is my cousin. We grew up together. We lived 5 minutes down the street from each other. And so what we are wanting to do today is just kind of talk to Dessa about her experience. So Dessa, how are you today?
I am so nervous. I've never been more nervous in an interview. I'll be really honest. I've done a few of these, and I think I don't want to let you down, Ryan. So I'm just really like, you can't see me, but I'm sweating profusely. But I'm really excited to be here. So thank you.
You can't let me down. It's okay.
This is beautiful. That was beautiful. I am touched.
So, Dessa, you grew up in Georgia, Metro Atlanta area. Kind of tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you kind of got wrapped into the arts.
Absolutely. So yeah, I grew up in Snellville, where everybody is somebody. Home of Diana DeGarmo was our big claim to fame back season 2 of American Idol. So that's what put us on the map. At least we thought so. But I was an avid reader. I used to read a lot, a lot, and I would write and would do little short stories and sometimes little plays that my cousins, who I may be speaking to, would perform for me. So that was always really great to have that support. And I'm so sorry, Micah's calling me, of course. What's up, Bob? It's
The
gonna start
kids
again.
wear crowns, and the kids wear crowns,
That's
and sometimes they make
We have
appearances.
generational
So there you
talent.
have it.
We are farming the next generation.
right.
This is real life. We want y'all to know this is how life goes. Sometimes you have to do an interview with your kid in the background, but you're still a parent, so they come first. Support your children.
Hashtag. I find it interesting that everybody that's in this right now has children. Um,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah. You can't. Life is
it is.
life. It's a balance. Right?
Joseph is 4 now, right?
He
Okay,
is.
and Jordan just turned 1.
Yeah, in February.
Is he still antagonizing Joseph like he was when I was there before?
Yes.
So sorry, you guys.
Oh
Okay.
no, you're fine.
Nah, no apologies
Okay.
necessary. You good.
Pick back up from where you were with reading, and I can edit that.
Yes. Okay. So rewinding. Yeah. So growing up, I read a lot. I was a really big reader. That was my pastime. That was kind of where I'd go to relax, where I'd go to hide if I just needed to be alone. And writing really became very therapeutic for me. Like it was a way to explore ideas and concepts you don't really know how to discuss yet, I guess. But also it's just really fun creatively. And so yeah, I would write short stories. I would write little plays. I remember Ryan, our trip to San Francisco. I think we were maybe 8, somewhere around there, and I was so inspired by Alcatraz that I wrote this little short play about this criminal who escaped, and my cousins performed it for me, and I was really excited. So in that way, I think my family was always a very big supporter of that. And in terms of when I chose film and TV specifically, I remember I was in fourth grade, I think, and we had this school project where in class we made a commercial and we filmed. It felt like for hours, like good 3 hours. And at the end of it, like the spot was maybe 15 seconds long, and I was so outraged at like the amount of work that we put in and how little it was on the screen afterwards. But I was also really fascinated by it as well, and I think that's when I kind of leaned in to film and TV. And then our aunt, Alile Sharon Larkin, is an avid filmmaker. She was really prominent in 70s, 80s out of UCLA, part of the LA Rebellion. And so she was really one of the first people to guide me in terms of exploring the film world. I remember I was 12 and I wrote my first feature film and I was so excited. And I gave it to her. And she's like, yeah, so you've got 42 pages here. Normally they're 120, but we'll get you there. And it was just really, yes, okay, then you just hit back and you find something else, okay? Remember I said I was going to be on a phone call? Can you say hi to Uncle Ryan?
Hey, Micah.
I'll be right back, you guys. I'm so sorry.
You good?
Come on back.
Dee, if you want to, when she finishes that question, if you want to jump in with another one.
Okay, yeah. She's kind of answering. She's doing a good job because I was going to ask her what made her decide to like what, because like you remember we were talking to it wasn't Ryan, it was I can't remember her name, who does the art shows. What's her name?
Oh yeah. Was it Kendra?
Kendra.
Yeah.
When we were talking to her and we were saying that our parents really wanted us to be successful, so they kind of pushed us into careers that they knew were kind of like big ticket. You know how your parents are.
Right.
You should be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. I'm just curious as to how she went that way. Like what afforded her the, I guess,
sorry.
the opportunity or whatever.
Had a really long week, and he had to work yesterday. So I was like, you should definitely go to the beach today. I can figure it out. And I'm sorry.
Love and support. We're all about it. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Many hats. Many hats.
Many hats.
So my aunt Alile Sharon Larkin was a really great resource for me, and showed me a lot of beautiful films when I was growing up. My mom also, I grew up watching TCM a lot, so I was just surrounded by really great filmmaking, and I think that was probably that was my upbringing in terms of being saturated with storytelling.
That's awesome. Okay, so could you, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us exactly what it is that a showrunner does? Like, what's the, I guess you could say, what's the resume keywords you could look for, and then what actually do you do?
Okay. So a showrunner is someone who is essentially responsible for the creative content and decision making around TV shows. So it's basically, in some cases, it's the person who creates it and who wrote the original script for it. In other cases, let's say that, like, if I were to sell something, I would not be allowed to run that show because I don't have that experience. So sometimes what they would do is they'll take a piece written by somebody else and then they'll pair it with someone who's a bit more seasoned to actually run it. And so then their job as the showrunner, that person is responsible for first putting together a writer's room, which depending on the show can be anywhere from like 6 to 11 writers. It is their responsibility to kind of lead the charge of that room, kind of get an idea of what the season of television looks like, kind of make sure that everyone's staying on track in terms of like the themes and the stories and the character arcs. And it's all, and all the writers contribute. All the writers are so essential in coming up with these stories. But essentially, it's the showrunner who is responsible for signing off on these things and kind of overseeing the writing schedule and assigning episodes to different writers. From there, when we go into production, they are responsible for making decisions about, I mean, every department kind of weighs in. So you have your props, you have your costumes, you have your set deck, and they are essentially responsible for creating, like your costume designer will create this beautiful palette of costumes, and then we'll present it to the showrunner, who then gives notes, and then eventually we'll say like, yes, that's exactly what we're looking for. Let's do it. Same thing with every other step of the way. And then they're also kind of in charge of like hiring directors and obviously, I mean, again, and just supported by so many producers. So I say this, but they're not, they have a huge support system. So it's not like they're by themselves trying to figure this all out, but they essentially are the final say in a lot of these things. And then when it gets into editing, with editing, you have a lot of moving pieces. As you're shooting, you have your brilliant editor who pieces everything together. And then your director comes in, and usually they have about 4 days to work on their episode to kind of polish it to how they feel it should be. And then after that, the showrunner goes in and essentially comes in as the producer and to play with it and really make sure that it is cohesive with the rest of the pieces. And so it's a lot. It's a lot of different things that they are responsible for. And I am a showrunner's assistant. So my job is basically, it's a lot of scheduling. It's a lot of knowing the story very intimately. It's knowing how to help delegate, how to help in the decision making process. It's, if the showrunner is struggling with the decision, it's my job to say, remember, these are the things that you were thinking about like a week ago that you can no longer think of because you have a million things in your head. So kind of just keeping everything. I'm doing a terrible job. What is my job?
You're doing a great job. It's just overwhelming because it sounds like a really big job.
A lot.
It's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you're explaining it well. It's just a lot. I mean, it's way more than what I thought it was.
It's a ton, yeah, because I mean, and that's just production, right? It's like in a production cycle, we go through the writer's room, we go through production, we go through post, and they all overlap, right? So like there's a couple of months where it's just the writer's in, but then it's a good few months where it's writer's room and production, and then as soon as production starts, post is also in. So you're juggling these three huge pieces all at one time, and then when that's all done, you're also dealing with press and you're dealing with, like Emmy considerations and you're dealing, hopefully, and then like like there's so many layers to it, and so my job is just to keep whoever I'm working for focused and informed. I think that's the big thing, is informed, because they have so many things going on in their heads, so I'm the one to kind of decompress it all and present it in a way that is manageable.
So when you first left your undergraduate experience in Boston and you got the first opportunity, what was it like trying to catch up to that pace?
It was pretty intense, I'll be honest. It was something where if I could go back, I loved school. I absolutely loved going to school in Boston. BU was great. Go Terriers. In terms of my degree, I don't think that my degree necessarily prepared me for what I was getting into. There's a lot of, I think college is a good time for you to kind of figure out like what you like and what you don't like, and I think in many other cases, like you're a bit more prepared for the world. Film is just a whole other ball game, right? Like production is just a whole other beast. And so when I first got my job, my first job was on a pilot called Hail Mary that was shooting in Atlanta. And I remember I was walking down the street. I had some friends visiting from Boston, and I saw that they were filming. And I had spent the last year doing little things, like I was volunteering for this guy who did a lot of commercials and kind of little like hired spots. So I had been doing a little bit of production, but on a much lower scale. And so I saw this production happening, and I walked on and I asked who I needed to speak to about working as a PA. And they got me in touch with Christina Peterson, who I like owe my career to, because she's this beautifully, wonderfully correct, like just wonderful, wonderful human being. And she was an assistant director on this pilot, and like I am super sweaty because I've just been sightseeing and I've like been showing my friends around. Like we hiked up Stone Mountain, so I do not look professional
Oh,
at
wow.
all. right? And I'm just like, I went to school and you should hire me because these are my qualifications. And just kind of like rattled off. She's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, come back tomorrow. And so she hired me for the remaining week that they had as a set PA. And my first day, I remember I walked on, like, I have no idea what. Oh, also, sorry, I'm so sorry. Profanity. How are we? Are we clean? Can I, like, what's
Oh, you
Go
said
for
whatever
it.
you want. We're good.
Thank you.
Express yourself.
Thanks. So my first day on the job, I walk in and I'm looking around like I have no idea like what the fuck any of these cameras are. Like these are not like they're so like advanced to what I was playing with like back in school, and I didn't have a full because like at school I took a class on lighting, but as a set PA, I'm not doing the lighting, right? Like there's like all these, you know what I mean? Like the classes that I took didn't have a real translation to what I was actually doing. And so I had no idea what my job was or how to do it well. And so I was really fortunate in that the people that I was working with really took me under their wing and like, all right, here's how to use a walkie. Like, here's proper walkie etiquette. Like, when you're speaking, here's what you say. Here's what you're like. They gave me like key phrases to make it sound like I knew what I was doing when I had no idea. I remember, so the pilot, it was starring Minnie Driver and Brandon T. Jackson, and I didn't think that I was going to be anywhere near them. And one of my first jobs was like, go see if they need coffee, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like I'm knocking on Brandon T. Jackson's trailer to get coffee, and then like I made Minnie Driver tea. I'm like, that's fine. This is a normal job, whatever. So then. But it definitely took like a village of people who really helped me learn it really fast. And I definitely messed up. Like we were doing a scene in it was in the precinct, like in this police precinct, and I was in charge of background actors who were basically just like crossing frame in the background. And I just got really mixed up and like sent a couple too fast and like brought some back. And I remember the director in the walkie was like, who is doing that? Do they know that we are filming right now? Like, what is happening? So I got replaced. But you learn and you grow. Dad, you're hungry? Okay. I'm so sorry, guys. 1 second.
No, you're good.
I was thinking when she said the background, I was thinking about how sometimes you can see the same person walk across like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
It's the funniest thing to me. I started
Paying
looking
attention
for
to
it
it.
now. Yeah, like oh yeah, there he is again. There he is again. There he is again. Like, dude, where are you going? At least make it look like you're going
Right.
somewhere, please. That's hilarious. Boston. I wonder what that was like. Have you ever been to Boston?
Yep. I went for her graduation.
Oh, well,
That
okay, of course.
was, that was that was the first time I went as an adult, and I want to go back, but also money, and I just don't feel like
Never
it.
been. No, I'm just people have made it seem like it's like one of the most racist places on earth, and I'm from the South, so you
Oh
know it's
no, it
pretty bad.
is. It definitely is. But
I can't.
I,
I know what kind of racism I get down here. I don't want different flavors.
right.
Like, let's stick with this
I
racism, the one
I
I know.
wanted to move there for a little bit after like we had went to her graduation. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I like this city. And then like as I got older, I was like, no, I'm good.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry. Okay,
It's okay.
here we
No, you're fine.
Where were we?
Yeah, they had replaced you on the
Oh yeah, on the
Right.
background because I was so terrible at directing backgrounds. They replaced me, but it was fine. Like it was definitely it was my first job, and I was just really thrilled and excited to be there, and it was great. But it was definitely I started from scratch. Like I always tell people, you don't need to go to school to get into film. Like no one has ever asked me for my degree. No one has ever talked to me about it. A lot of it is very much your experience going in. I loved school, and I will always have gone to school for many reasons. But at the end of the day, my degree in no way helped me with my career. So no, that's not true. That's not true. What I will say is, while I was in school, the classes that I enjoyed the most were not my film classes; they were my literature classes. And I think a lot of the stories that I read and studied influenced who I am as a writer and the types of things that I want to write. And I think the personal interactions that I had definitely influenced my mission as a writer as well. Um, Coming into, because I was going into Boston from Atlanta, and Georgia obviously has some issues with race. And then going to Boston, I thought I was moving to a blue state and realized, oh no, you guys have issues with race too, but in a much different way. And it was something where, like, Boston was the first place that I was ever refused service somewhere, and that was like a big thing. And but more so, it was more so the people that I met who were very lovely and educated and came from these affluent and wealthy families, but just had never met anybody outside of their own community.
And
And so
what year? I'm sorry to cut you off. What year was this?
this was, so I went to school 2006. So
That's
I was there
crazy.
2006, 2007.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so, so I remember my junior year. No. Okay, I'll go back. So my freshman year, I lived in a room of there were six of us, six girls sharing a suite. And one of my roommates was from Connecticut, and when we met, one of like her first question was like, "Oh, what are you?" Which I get a lot. I get a ton, and I always tell people like I'm not biracial. I'm like multi-ethnic, but I'm not biracial. Like I am Black. We come in a big spectrum, right? Like both of my parents are Black. All four of my grandparents are Black. Are they all mixed with something? Yes, but it's because it comes from like a few generations back, right? So culturally, I am Black. That's what I am, and we come in a lot of different shades. And so, but I'm used to that question. I'm very accustomed to it. But afterwards, when I told her that I was Black, that I was African American, she said, "Oh, so do people in your family have funny names?" And
Oh my
she
goodness.
didn't at all mean it maliciously. Like it wasn't intended to be a dig. It was just that's all she knew, right? Like she had never met anyone outside of her own like group. And so it kind of like something kind of triggered in me there, but it didn't really come to fruition until a couple of years later where I'm in school, and at the time, I was doing sketch comedy. And I was the head writer of our sketch comedy group, Overexposed. And I remember I was in the room, and the writers were kind of pitching different sketches. And there's this one girl who pitched this sketch that was actually really cute about this group of criminals who come back after a night of looting. And the punchline is one of them robs the library, and they're like, haha, because everything's free. But she ended it with, I just don't know if we have enough Black guys to cast.
Oh
And
my
at
god.
the time, like I was so stunned, but I had never encountered these things before, and I wasn't, or at least not in this direct way. Like I didn't know how to properly respond, right? And it's something that kind of took me some time to figure out what I should have said. Obviously, after the fact, I was like, I should have said this, but it's something that really stuck with me that I had to really mull over for a while. And what it came down to was I didn't feel that same to me, it felt different than like the direct kind of in your face hatred that I think comes from growing up in Georgia. I mean, and also like in the North End and Southie and Boston. But in this particular case, it definitely felt like this is all I know. It just felt like just pure ignorance, right? And it was something different. I didn't know how to, because it wasn't malicious, it was insidious, right? Like it was something that, or insidious. God, it wasn't malicious, it was insidious. Is that how you pronounce that word? Uh, but and so that's what really took a turn in me because I remember like my aunt Alile, she and I would have these discussions all the time when I was growing up because she made films that were definitely heavily embedded in community. And for me, I wanted to make like big Hollywood blockbusters, and I felt like if I told specifically Black stories, that I would never be on a platform as big as the movie. Like I wanted to be big, right? Like I wanted to tell really big stories. And so to me, the only way that would happen is if I mixed up my cast, right? So the idea of being a representative of a race was kind of something that was never fully on my radar until I had those experiences at school. And I realized this is what is so dangerous about mis and underrepresentation because when you're not properly represented, Black and criminal become synonymous, and that is how people get killed, right? Like that is the danger in how media affects people and how they grow up and how they perceive the world. And so that's kind of when I took it upon myself to really be a beacon for underrepresented stories. And it's still across the board. Like, I don't think that I am a Black only storyteller, but for me, it is about broadening the spectrum of the stories we're telling, of the people that we're representing. And I owe a lot of that to my experience in school.
I'm very, very happy that you shared that story, because I feel like now that there's a lot more representation. I remember vividly that before, I think it was Insecure and Blackish and Atlanta, all of them kind of came in a wave right together. And right before they did, I remember asking people, was there a show on television that you feel represents you, you know? And a lot of people said no. And then when those shows came in, it was like, oh, okay, well, now I feel better. But oh my gosh, y'all forgive me if this sounds bad, okay? There's still a piece, it feels like, that's missing, because it's almost like the Black shows or the people that are representing us now are trying to be stupid Black, like so Black. And it's for people that are Black, it's very obvious that you're being really, really extra, you know?
Yeah.
Like Insecure, like
Like
the cast of Insecure
it's
posting the picture of Hennessy and whatever it
and
was.
hot sauce, and yeah,
Yeah,
and it's like, come on, man. Like, okay, that's cool, and you know, you got your shea butter and hot sauce, and that's it's almost insulting, and you understand what they're trying to do, I guess, on a certain level, but for the people who just have that stuff at their house because it's just there, I don't have to take a picture and have my cocoa butter in the background for you to know that I'm Black. And it's just it's so annoying. And it's like, I'll take the representation, I appreciate it, but I don't want to just like take it. I want it to really truly represent who we are. If
Yeah.
you are a Black person that doesn't use cocoa butter or drink Hennessy, then be that. That's like there are Black people that don't do that. Like, we're not a monolith. It's so, God, it's so frustrating, because the shows are good and you get excited about it, and then they do that, and you're like, okay, here we go. Here we go again. Here we
It,
go again.
you hit on a very good point in that I think sometimes people feel like, oh, well, you've got these shows now, therefore you must feel better. And I think you're right. And the answer is, we're not done. We're nowhere near done. Because I think when you grow up white in America and you're watching TV, you have every single, you can be doctors, lawyers, you can be like redneck.
Crackheads. You
Exactly.
can you can be prostitutes.
It is
You
this
can
wide.
work at the laundromat. Yeah.
Exactly. And so if you see someone who is like, let's say, a crackhead prostitute, you're like, that's fine, because also I've seen this doctor who is also a lawyer and rescues orphans, right? Like, I have a whole spectrum. And so you can see them as individual characters, where I think for women, for people of color, for like all of the marginalized groups, it's like there's so much pressure, like you said, for every show to represent that entire community, and that's not accurate, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is a piece of the community that is, a piece of the story, but it's not the full story. And so I am so grateful that, yes, we are getting a bit more representation. But I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you, and then I think that it's I don't think it's just a piece missing. I think we have much of the puzzle left. Like, we have a few pieces there, but we have so many more stories that need to be fleshed out. And what I also find really interesting is, it's I've also been kind of wary of it, only because I'm still waiting to see if this is something that's really going to stick, or if this is something that is popular because people realize that they can make money off of it. And so I am glad that it's there. I sometimes question how genuine it is. And I do firmly believe that it is in so many cases. But I also wonder, because you have the creatives, but you also have like the producers who are funding it. And I feel like I still think that there might be a gap between the creatives who are really invested in the story that they're telling versus the people who know that they're going to get a check on the back end of it. And so I'm grateful that it's there, that the exposure is getting there, but also, capitalism. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I also work, I mean, I am so grateful to live in California. I am so grateful to live in LA. I'm so grateful to work in an industry that is so liberal and progressive because they do line up with so many of my values. But I will say that I've been in so many disappointing meetings still. Like for this to be one of the most progressive cities and industries. I have been in meetings with, I love my managers now. My managers now are amazing and I adore them so much and they see me and and what I want to do. I was working with a company before them who I didn't love. Um, but I remember being in a meeting with them and I was pitching a story about this movie that I wanted to write that took place in New Orleans. And at the end of my pitch, they're like, "Yeah, well, we just don't know if there's an actress of that demographic who could carry it." Like, what? I'm sorry. Like, nothing about the story, nothing about like anything. It's just like, yeah, we just don't know if there's like mixed race talent. Like, but, and this is what gets me, right? What gets me is that you have it's this idea that if you are a white actor, you're introduced, right? Like, oh, introducing so and so, like the hot new thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a person of color trying to come up as an actor, it's like, well, we just don't know what they've done. There aren't enough because it's just like it's like this whole other thing of you need to prove yourself before we'll give you a shot, but we're not going to give you any lines to prove yourself, and so it's a struggle across the board. And so I do see a lot of writers that I'm working with who are working very avidly to change that. It's something where it used to be that the default is if you're writing a character, you just presume that they're white until you put in like parentheticals that whatever other race that they are. And so now there's this thing where it's like, no, like you need to name everybody, say exactly what they are, mix it up a bit. Like don't just let the default be a default. Like actively think about who it is that you're creating, which I think is helping a bit. Always Be My Maybe was amazing. I love that movie so much.
Yeah, me too.
It was so sweet. But it also makes me upset that we're so excited about this in 2019, right? Like, but anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
mentioned that there was a gap there, and so I think a lot of times when people talk about this gap that exists from the top levels to the people that are actually doing the groundwork, a lot of times people want you to yell and scream and make a case, make a point so that the people at the top pay attention. But we all know just from working in different fields that that's not always realistic. So how do you think we bridge that gap? Is it simply bringing more people in at the ground level, or how do we make that gap close a little bit quicker?
That's a great question. I mean, I do think that it reminds me a lot actually of this debate that was occurring during the Harlem Renaissance between the artists then in terms of what was your role as an artist, right? Like, is it as a Black writer, are you responsible for telling Black stories and representing your community because nobody else will? Or just by existing, are you proving that you can be there and in that position and that's enough? And I've struggled with this quite a bit in terms of where I fall. I think it's somewhere in the middle. To answer your question more specifically, I do think that bringing more people in um, is essential because what happens a lot of times is like I was in a room where there was a group of writers who were trying to figure out like this Native American kind of ceremony. And I just remember sitting there watching this group of white men talk about this thing that none of them have ever experienced or encountered. They're basing it off of what they saw on TV growing up, which was created by a group of white men who had no idea what they, you know what I mean? Like it's just kind of like this
Right.
cycle. And so I think it's a matter of absolutely bringing in people across the board who have different experiences, who can relate to them honestly, um, but also just being. I think it's I honestly think it's just going to come with time. I hate to say it. I do think it's like the next generation moving up, because we are still in a place where, there's a lot of elderly kind of white men running the show still. And I think that as much as you want them to open up their minds, they come from a very different place than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is getting people in on the ground level, learning the industry, learning everything you can about it, and then just moving up and being a part of the conversations and the decisions that were being made. I was in a meeting where we were discussing casting for this one particular character, and the character was was very much like a professional character, and the casting company, they were so excited about this actress, this black actress, and the director, because all the directors are different, like they all come, it's a different director every episode, they kind of just, they're just visiting, basically is what we say, like they're visiting directors. And so after the meeting, our director says, well, I just want to let you know, I just worked with her on another project and she has dreads now. So I don't know if she's going to fit in with this professional atmosphere. And I lost my shit. And so at that point, to me, like, I can't just like be like, sorry, I'm going to disagree with you there, like in the middle of this meeting. But what I did do was immediately, like, I hopped onto Google Images, like, let me just show you how professional dreads can be, right? Because I think you have a different idea of what this is. And so I compiled this beautiful list of just images of women with gorgeous, gorgeous locks in professional settings with professional hair. And I talked to my producers about it. And it was it was kind of different because one of our writers was definitely on board. It's like, yeah, I don't know why you said that. Like, definitely, there's no issue to this. There's no issue to this. But then another producer agreed with him, and this other producer felt like, well, it's not a race thing. There are plenty of white women with dreads, but I just don't think that it fits. And at that point, I realized, okay, it's even deeper than what I thought. And that's like a whole other discussion of, now I have to explain the cultural relevance. Like, I think a white woman getting dreads is much different than a black woman getting dreads, because for black women, hair is such, it's a thing that you're discriminated against, right? Like, if you wear your hair natural, that's not professional. If you use a lot of heat, if you lose chemicals to straighten, if you're consistently brushing it, it damages your hair. So at that point, what are your options to do something that is somewhat acceptable to your workplace, but also doesn't cost you your own personal hygiene? And so, but that's a conversation that, like, at that point, by the time I thought of what to say, it was too late. It's like, I'm not.
But that's such a loaded situation too, that you can't just think of when you're hit with stuff like that. You're never expecting it, and I think a lot of times when people, especially like in the social media realm, start saying, well, you should do this, you should do that, they're not thinking about all the thoughts that are going through your head when that hits, because who's prepared on the daily at every moment for casual racism?
Not me. I'd be exhausted. Not me at all. And I think of brilliant things later, but it's always just, it's too late. But then you're right too, because at the end of the day, the long con of it is, I need to stay in this industry and I need to do well so that I can create the content that I want to create to represent and uplift the people that I want to represent and uplift. And so in those moments, like, yeah, I'm not going to win that battle. And if I keep digging my heels in, and if I like try and be loud and confront every single thing, that's just gonna make everyone around me uncomfortable. That's gonna make no one want to work with me, and then I lose that spot. And so, it's something where you just take mental notes. I'm like Aria making my list, right? Like, these are all the things I gotta do when I get there. So, yeah, it's a balance, and it's tricky because, again, like, on the forefront, you do have these shows that are widening their casting, that are making an effort to be more inclusive, not even more inclusive, just more realistic, I think. And that's the thing. I know so many people who get angry about it, like, oh, I feel like everyone's jamming diversity down my throat. I'm like, no, this is what my community looks like. Like, when I walk around, this is what I see. So I feel like it's just a more accurate representation of who's around us. But yeah, we do have a lot of work to do, and it is frustrating, kind of fighting your time, but it's necessary.
Yeah. So you said a balance, and that made me think of, have you had to make that decision where people have asked you, are you a woman or a black first?
That is a good question. I don't think that I've been asked outright, but I have been in situations that made me question myself.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, we went to my office a couple of years ago, went to the Women's March downtown in LA, and I was so excited to be part of this collective of my community, and my husband came and my kid came, and it was just this really crazy thing to be a part of. But I do remember I got there and I'm standing there, and the city is just flocked with thousands and thousands and thousands of women. And, we're all there for this cause to uplift. And I remember feeling, though, once all of these causes are done, let's say that we check off equal pay, we check off, less sexual or zero sexual harassment would be nice. Like once we get all of these things done, do I feel like my community has made it? I don't, because I think in that moment I felt more black than I felt like a woman, because all of the lady things, as soon as those are done, I still have other things that I'm still fighting for. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think for me, I definitely feel brown before I feel my gender. A lot of it too, a lot of things when I see shows who are really patting themselves on the back for being diverse because they've hired women, I look and I still see a white room. And so yeah, I think for a while I was kind of, it wasn't something I really thought about, but without anyone asking directly, I think it's more in pursuance of diversity and in pursuing more women as a person of color that has made me lean more towards skin color.
Mm-hmm.
That
Gotcha.
That's very, yeah. I mean, that's very interesting to hear. I mean, it makes sense because I feel like Deandra, I'm assuming you kind of lean the similar way,
Well,
especially in your field.
see, I think that's the thing. Like people ask, and then there are people there. Of course, there that the answer is I'm both. I'm both at the same time. I'm always both, and you are, you are. But at work, it like it's really not as easy as it should be, because it depends on what you see when you're in whatever situation, right? Because like honest to God, I'm black all the time. Like that doesn't change. I'm a woman all the time. That doesn't change. But if I go into a space and it's majority men, I'm going to think, okay, there aren't any more women here,
Mhm.
first, and then, oh my gosh, then I'm gonna look for the black people, right? Because
Right,
that's what I
right.
see. If I go into a room and I see all people that aren't black, I'm gonna be like, okay, there aren't any black people in here. Okay, so maybe where are the women? That's just how I think. But I don't know. I don't think it's fair to ask anybody which one are you first,
yeah,
because that's just like asking men, are you black first or are you a male first? I mean, you're both all the time, but you're still that part of you, or whatever thing that you're most concerned about is going to jump out first in your mind, but you're still both of those things simultaneously at all times.
yeah. I think you're right. It's very situation specific.
Right.
And I do think that on some level, because it is, I mean, where I work is a very, very male predominant field.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, like my last show, I was really lucky. Oops, sorry. My last show I was really lucky because I was working in a place that was very family oriented. And so it was my first time going back to work as a mother. And that was really a struggle because I'm pumping and I'm, feeling really guilty about like
Oh my
doctor's
goodness.
visits and all of these things. So they were very supportive on that front because a lot of them, even like the dads, had to take time off for their kids. And then I was also surrounded by a lot of really strong and powerful women producers, which was really cool. And so, but I will say, just it was last month, I was on a show, I was on set, and I'm talking to one of the crew members, and we're just chatting, and I mentioned my son, and he's like, oh, so wait, are you married? Which I thought was an odd question
Oh my
because I mean,
goodness.
I don't have to be, but yes, I am. And then his next question was, well, who looks after your son while you're at work? And
His
I was
father.
curious, right? I was like, uh, you're bringing this up clearly because you want to discuss daycares, right? Like you have a question about what I don't.
Yeah.
It was really frustrating because suddenly I think there's this. I mean, there's already a guilt. I think any working parent has that guilt of like I'd rather be playing with my kid, and I think that there is, but also like I need to feed them too. So it's kind of this battle of doing both things well and feeling like you're not doing either well.
Hmm.
Um, but
Mine is the whole you're letting somebody else raise your kid thing. That's the one
right,
that's the most annoying.
right. It's like I'm sorry, I'm providing for my kids.
Yeah.
Also, I am not the personality. Like, even if I had the chance to stay home all day, I would stay home more. But working is such an essential part of who I am. And I love my job. I love what I do. It fulfills me in a way that my child also fulfills me. And so I couldn't not have my job in my life. It is,
Hmm.
I think,
Your
difficult.
choice. Yeah.
Yes, it's a choice, but it's essential to me. And it's hard balancing both, but especially when you get questions like that make you feel like you should be in the kitchen at home, like making 5-course meals every day. But it's yeah, it's challenging sometimes,
Another comeback you should have for that next time is well, who watches your child?
right?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
then it can get ugly because it'll be, well, my wife stays at home and blah 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 blah, and it could spiral and it just goes to places you don't want to go. So you just
oh, yeah.
say,
I mean, I
there they
don't mean
care.
that 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would never advise anybody that I actually care about Dessa to do that. Um, I'm just saying that's one of those play the argument back over in your head, like, yeah, well, who watches your child?
And that's like it's one of those moments where I call it a teachable moment, right? Because it's one of those things where like immediately I am pissed the fuck off, but I also
Hmm.
recognize that like those interactions in college, he wasn't doing it to be like, why aren't you at home? It was just this no, it was just like an innocent question in his mind, like, oh, I'm curious about this situation
Yeah.
because, it's a different mind. I don't think it's a helpful mindset at all. And so at that point, for me to get visibly angry, I then turn into an angry woman, an
I
emotional
was
woman.
I was just about to ask you about that. Do you have that fear that anything you say immediately makes you the angry black woman?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what happens is, this is also part of like how I was raised though, because I was not raised to talk back. And so it took me a really long time to find my voice and to be able to stand up for myself.
Hmm.
But what's ended up happening is because I like to write things down, what happens is if I have a feeling about something, I don't say anything initially. And then that gives me time to really think about, okay, why am I upset about this? Let me break it down. Years of therapy has helped with this as well. So like let me just like get to the core of this. What is it that's bothering me? How do I communicate that the best way? So I think I'm always a bit late, I think, in my responses, but then I'm prepared for the next one. So then the next one, and I can have like a more thoughtful response that's more constructive
Hmm.
than my initial uh, anger at being asked ridiculous questions.
So it's just a real life version of think before you speak.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
absolutely,
that's that's
absolutely.
that's admirable. I'm a little less inclined to do that, but yeah,
But
it
Oh,
you
works.
do, D, you do,
I
and
don't. I don't. Yeah, but I'm the same way because I don't. You said I wasn't raised to talk. You were taught not to talk back. I think that's like common for us.
mm,
Just. I don't. I mean, I won't even say that it's necessarily a black thing because it may be, but I think it's also southern because of the our manners and whatnot. But
respect,
I
no,
feel the same way. But I've realized that I'm now teaching my kids to kind of question things, and it's annoying, but I want them to be able to take a second to realize that they're being tried and then respond accordingly because I have no problem. I like the fact that you take a second, you take a beat, and you are prepared for the next time you're able to confront, whatever it is. but my brain is really active when it comes to that. So if I take a second, I'll take a second and I'll think about it, but I have to get out what I have to say, or I'm gonna be thinking about it nonstop
Yeah.
for however long, whatever. But yeah, I actually like that a lot. That makes a lot of sense. I'm the same way. I work in a male dominated field, and I do have a coworker that's black, but I just don't, just being a woman, period. You're you're an angry woman or you're irrational woman at all times. And then if you're black, now you're, soup. So not only are you angry, you're ghetto and you rolling your neck and all this other stuff that they are imagining that you're doing.
Yeah,
And
well,
we're
don't
just
forget
having
to
a
snap
reasonable
your fingers.
conversation.
You need to snap your fingers
Oh
while you
yeah,
do
that too, because we do that. That's something we do. I
I'm
don't know, but
actually
yeah.
a snapper. Just in general, I can't do it. But
Right. I could not imagine. Ryan and I were talking about it because I told him I'd never been to Boston, and I was saying that I know this flavor of racism, and I don't know how I would handle it if I were there with the less overt, I guess, racism. Um, because where you were smart enough and I guess kind enough to think that maybe they didn't mean it in this way, and you can kind of tell that they were coming from a place of ignorance. I don't know how I would have reacted to that because I'm so used to people being racist on purpose, I guess I should say.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
it definitely threw me off. It definitely, and let me. I'll just clarify too. I think age is also why I felt it was an ignorance thing because we're
Mm-hmm.
18, 19. This is the first time that they're really leaving home. If anyone in their 30s comes at me like that, like that's a different story, I think.
Yeah.
We've had time to learn. But part of it was, I mean, it is people who are just like, we're kids and we're trying to figure stuff out. And so, I think I'm not excusing it. Like I think that's where you see the problem and that's
Mm-hmm.
where you look for solutions. And to me, media is a very powerful way to change that. Like I went to this panel a couple months ago and they were talking about how the numbers of drunk drivers decreased after the designated driver was introduced in TV. Like this idea that like, oh, it is okay if someone just doesn't drink and drives me home. Like that's cool. Like, oh, I could be that person. Like once you kind of see it, then it kind of becomes it's normalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I read this beautiful, beautiful article that the BBC has up right now about the representation of Muslims in media and how it has been very, very unflattering. It's very much essentially how we were 10 years ago. Like you're the villain, you are like the
Mm-hmm.
surprise. It's a surprise if you're like actually educated and doing well for yourself, right? Like it's and just how people respond to that and take that and how it's such a small percentage of people who are radicalized, but it's the majority of what you see and how that really it's starting to shift a little, like just a little tiny bit, but there's so much more to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, it changes how you see yourself, I think, and it's really so important. Yeah, bub. Yep, I'm still chatting. May I have a few more minutes?
I want to come
You
too.
want to come too? Okay, you have to be quiet while mommy's talking, okay?
Okay, pizza.
All right, spaghetti head. All right, guys.
So
So,
I'm sorry, Ryan, go
no,
ahead.
you go ahead, D.
Okay. If you were to, you were saying that school was essential in a way, but maybe the path you would have chosen then would be a little different. If you had to give advice on someone who's interested in getting into the same profession that you are in, what would you suggest? What route would you suggest they take?
So I would say that's a great question. So I think that school is not essential to getting into film and TV, but I also think you have to do what feels right to you. For me, I love storytelling, and so the class. If I could go back, I would just study history and literature, and that I think would help me in film because of the writing that I like to do. People who work more on the technical side of things probably would have gotten more out of lighting classes and production classes because it is more hands on and technical. There are different types of film schools as well. I mean, BU was definitely more of a liberal arts school and that you had your technical, but you also had your film theory and you had your other electives that were non-film related. Whereas Emerson is super technical and all you were doing is making movies for 4 years, right? So I also know people out here, a lot of people go back and get their master's at USC in writing, and a large part of that is because of all of the networking and the connections that that particular school gets you. And so, yeah, I mean, I think people are multifaceted and layered, and I think if school services those layers for you, do it. If you're doing it because you feel like that's the only way to get into film, don't do that because then you'll owe a house for no reason. But um, there's, I mean, it's a very open industry in terms of you walk in, so long as you're ready to work hard and take a lot of shit for a few years before you move up, like you're golden, you're fine.
So I guess I'll ask the golden question maybe. So we talked a little bit about how hectic it can be on set and everything that you just have to get nailed in order. So aside from the being in charge of the background cast, what's a disaster you had to avoid during production that you were successful at avoiding, but it probably aged you about 5-10 years?
Oh God, everything. So there's always the thing about production is, okay, I got it. So the thing about production is everything is always urgent, like but nothing really is. I mean, there are some things that are urgent, but every email I get is usually like urgent, needs immediate attention. And so the key thing about my particular job is to go through that list, know what is actually burning and what can wait, but also how long it can wait, right? So you might have something like, oh, we need to, the actress doesn't like this dress that we chose last week. Can we get a new one? And it shoots, in 10 minutes. Obviously, we need to get that done. I'm sorry, that was so sexist of me because it's an actress and she's wearing a dress. What if it's this actor doesn't like this hat that he's in? Whatever it is, like if there's something that's immediate and like in the scene that's about to take place, obviously it needs immediate attention. If it's something like Art is designing a banner that's going to be featured in a march or something, and it doesn't play for 2 more weeks, but you have to know that it needs to go to the printing press, and that's going to take a week, and that there's going to be revisions. So even though it seems like it's down the line, actually we do need to get this ball rolling, that type of thing. So it's making sure you know what's on fire, what can wait, and how long it can wait before that is also on fire. It's also, I think, being very diplomatic as well, because all of these departments are working incredibly hard. They're working under a lot of stress as well. And so if, let's say, we get something in that isn't quite right for what the showrunner wants, it's not helpful to go back and say, this is wrong, do it again, because someone put their creativity into that. Someone, did that and presented it thinking that it was right. And so it's a large part of my job that was a bit tricky that I think is important to learn is to really get the note behind the note, as we call it, right? Well, what don't you like about this? Is it the color? Is it the shape? Is it because this booth is green and the character is wearing green and when they sit down, they're going to blend in, right? Like finding out how to explain what it is that needs to be changed and why, but also having an appreciation for the person who presented it. So going back and saying, actually, we would like this booth to be upholstered red because of what this character is wearing. And just, I think sometimes a lot of people like to get kind of in a power trip and be like, no, we don't like this. Start over again. And that's not helpful to anybody. And I think, just learning how to really empathize with all of the departments, with everyone that you're working for, to really break down what the needs are and to give constructive criticism and advice is definitely the majority of my job. And I think something that takes a while to learn how to do well.
So you've had experience. The two, I would say, I guess, biggest that you've had on your resume are, of course, The Walking Dead and Better Call Saul. So I know there are probably some other ones that you have in there. I know The Messengers is something that you did for a little while, but just talk about your experiences with some of those, the people you've been able to meet, and how that's kind of shaped your future moving forward.
Of course. And I will add, I'm really excited to add that Westworld is now on that resume as well. So that's my current position. So I'm really excited about that. But I think each show, I mean, every show is run differently. And every show I've learned things that I would like to do in my own rooms, but also things that I don't want to do in my rooms. The Walking Dead was really interesting because that one, I think that was my film school basically. Because I started off as a set PA. I ran base camp. I was the post PA. I was the writer's PA. I was the writer's assistant for a minute. And so that gave me a full 360 of production, right? Like that really prepared me for when I went into my interview with Peter Gould on Saul. One of the things he liked about my resume was that I had worked on set because he also directs. And so having someone who understands how production works, who can be on the ground and understand the craziness of set hours was really appealing. And then with working on Saul, it's the same thing, right? Like I'm next to him during the writer's room, during production, during post. And so it was kind of like a different point of view, but through all of the departments again. And so it's been, I'm sorry, Ryan, what was your question?
No, just like I guess what were some of your favorite experiences from the people that you met on set for those?
So with Walking Dead, I loved how much of it, I mean, every show is a family in their own right, but Walking Dead is my first family. And being on set, you're in the trenches with people. You're working 14-hour days. Like I would get to work, see the sunrise, see the sunset, and just be on my feet the entire time. And like my big toe on my right foot went numb for 6 months because I just lost the nerve. Like I beat the nerve endings from just walking on it so much.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. My doctor was like, this usually happens with soldiers, just so you know. So, um,
Wow.
um,
The type of
but
contract in me would have been like, I'm gonna lose my toe. It's gonna fall off.
I was like, why can't I feel anything? This is odd.
I know. What is wrong with it?
But it's almost like being at summer camp in a way. Because at the end, I remember I was watching the scene. I was standing on set and watching the scene. I think it's season 2 or 3, where Herschel loses his leg, and just I'm standing in this prison like that was built basically, and I'm watching these actors do their thing. And I just remember thinking, I have such a cool job. This isn't a real job, but I really am glad that I'm doing it because it's fun. It's really fun. Um,
That's
work,
awesome.
yeah, and then working in post, going into post production to work with the editors, I was such a bigot coming from set. I was like, all the hard work happens on set, you guys. But then watching the editors work, it's incredible how much storytelling happens after the fact. Because I watched this one scene, and the director's cut, it's two characters, they're having a conversation, their relationship is kind of on the rocks. And by the end of the scene, I thought, okay, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll be all right. And then a couple of passes later, I'm watching the scene again, and it's the exact same scene, same actors, same dialogue, same everything, but they changed kind of the nuances that you settle on. And by the end of it, I was bawling like they're never gonna make it. It's over. And it was just so magical to me how different it felt based off of just nuances, right? And I think that's really cool.
So
Um,
it's like you're getting this. You're getting to do what you love, and you're honing your craft, but you get to see other people who are really good at doing something. Also, that is cool.
Yeah, it's really good. And then I thought when I first started on Walking Dead that I wanted to write and direct, but then seeing all the directors, and I've had the chance to work with some really, really cool directors, and just seeing the way that they think about story in terms of, like this lens versus this lens in the camera and what that's going to do for you, and how to shoot it and from what angle, and just all of these things. Like to me, going into it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can make a shot list and piece this together. But then seeing how thoughtful and how creative they were and how much they had studied their craft of just knowing a camera intimately and knowing, you know, this progression of scenes is going to feel this way. It was just so out of my depth that I realized writing, producing is definitely more my speed and more my temperament and more how my brain works. So again, a lot of it is learning what you, pardon me, a lot of it is learning what you don't want to do or what you're not as good at as you once thought you were. Saul is great. I love all of the actors in Saul are amazing. Ray Seahorn is a national treasure. I adore her, and she actually directed a short that I wrote before I left, which was really cool. Because it was a situation of like ladies helping ladies, right? Like we all wanted to kind of rise up in our careers and do something different, and it was really cool. Her and our first assistant director, Anna Remy Borden, who is just my favorite person on earth. So that was really neat, and being part of, I guess, like a lady collective of we're all gonna do a side project and do what we want to do, which is really fun. And yeah, it's just a really good group of people. Like I think that was my favorite, one of my favorite shows to work on. Saul was because everyone is just so lovely and sweet. And same thing with Westworld. Westworld was just, it's a crazy show. Like it is an insane show to work on and to produce because there's so many moving parts, but everyone is just so sweet and so lovely. And Tessa Thompson is a goddess. I adore her, so she's great. But yeah, it's all been really fun. I can't say that there's a job that I've had some jobs that I've hated, but I've still learned from them. I've learned from them all, which has been beneficial. And now I'm rambling.
Well, if you ever do need a pitch, I think we've been trying to convince Ron to share stories with you about his experiences working at a library. So, which are very weird. I'm just gonna send some to you, like not anything in that sense, but I'm gonna send you some stories just because they're funny and I feel like you could use a laugh. So Desa, thank you so much for spending this hour with us.
It was really a
Of
joy
course,
speaking
thanks
with
for
you.
having me, guys.
You're welcome. Also, I do have one more question. When we did that It's Your House, It's Your World, whatever it was, when we were like 7 or 8, did you write that or did we just all come up with that on our own?
No, I think that was you, Ryan. That was yours.
I don't think that was me. I don't recall doing anything like that.
Really? Because in my head, I always think that it was, like, whenever I think of you in radio, I'm like, I should have known because, it's your world. And yeah, we had some good summers. We had some really good summers. For those
For
of you,
all, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
it seems that you might remember this more than we do. It was like one of those it's on Toy Story now, like those white recorders, right, with like the little microphone attached to it with like the little curly cord. And so we made this little I guess it was kind of a soap opera. It was like a radio show.
Yeah, for those unfamiliar, the Steve Harvey show, it was Steve Harvey radio show, or no, Tom Joyner. It was Tom Joyner. Back in the day, they used to run that It's Your World little fake soap opera on their radio show, and it was a 2 or 3 minute skit, and it was always ridiculous, and it was
so ridiculous.
But at the time when you're like 7 or 8 years old, it lasts forever, and it's just the funniest thing in the world. So one summer when we were bored, because as Desa mentioned, we would literally spend summers together. It would be Desa and her younger brother and myself and my older brother. And for whatever reason, we just made our own version of it that was incredibly stupid. It somehow included some rednecks. I don't recall anything other than that line of Sammy saying, "Ma, Pa, get your shotguns. It's hunting season." But it was just, we're having our own like back and forth inner, inside joke. But I was bringing that up to demonstrate Desa's creativity. And just that was always a thing of our childhood. So to see her living her dream, it doesn't surprise me because I always figured she would be wherever she wanted to be. Because as she mentioned, this is the person that read a Harry Potter book in how long? How quickly did it take you?
Oh God, I read the first one. I will say it was the first one of my friends, you guys. It was before it was big, 5th grade, and I read it in one night. It was a good book. It's a good book. So I was like, I'll just stay up because it's better than sleeping. The last one took me 3 days, though. That one took me a little while.
Oh, wow. So long. So long. Either way.
I will say, since becoming a parent, I have not read a book. I read a lot of kids' books, but it's been so long since I've actually read a book, and that is retirement to me. I just want to be in a bungalow somewhere reading.
Well, where can they find your work? Is there any? Do you have any kind of website or anything of that nature that people can look you up?
I don't. I actually last year was social media free. I was really proud of myself for not having anything. I mean, I'm listed on all my credits are on IMDb, and then I am now on Twitter as of a few months ago.
I'm so sorry.
I know. I don't know how long that's gonna last. I feel like I'm gonna be exiting shortly, but tried it. So
Either way,
You'll be
Desta,
fine.
thank you so much for your time. Dee, any last words from you?
No, I just really appreciate your you being candid and honest and giving some advice and some info. It was really cool. It was really nice speaking to you.
thank you. I love being here. Thank you guys for what you're doing. I think it's really cool.
Awesome. Well, her name is Desa Larkin-Boutte. Look her up on IMDb, and Desta, we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.